Hello, welcome to another edition of Book with Ben. Today we shall be reading about the legendary Japanese swordsman Musashi, as he is commonly known, though his full name was Shinmen Musashi no Kami Fujiwara no Genshin. Now, Musashi was born in 1584 and raised by his stepmother and older sister. His father would occasionally appear on the scene to teach the young boy the sort of elementary swordsmanship, which was shortly coming very useful indeed. He learned and studied and practiced by himself. And so his first duel was at the age of 13. And he was walking along and he passed a sign that said, "Whoever wants to challenge me at swordsmanship shall be accepted," followed by a name. And underneath this, Musashi scribbled, "I will challenge you tomorrow." And he added his name and address so that this mysterious opponent could find him. The opponent appeared and they didn't fight there and then. They arranged a meeting place. They arranged a dueling place. In fact, this was very early in the morning, but it still followed a freezing pre-dawn bath that Musashi was apparently fond of taking. However, there is also other evidence to say that he suffered very badly from eczema, and this somehow led to him not washing at all because it hurt him too much. It hurt his skin, or he didn't wash at all because he was always completely paranoid that he'd be taken by surprise. He'd literally be, caught in the nod in his bath by an opponent, especially when he got more and more famous. It was like the old days of the Wild West. The champion, six-shooter was always being challenged out, and so it became known for Musashi. But anyway, this was his first duel at the age of 13, and he used a wooden sword against his armed opponent, who was armed with a proper katana, that's a Japanese sword, and he actually beat the guy to death with his wooden sword. Then it was been another 3 years for another duel, and then he was caught up in the Battle of Sekigahara, which was the famous Japanese battle of 1600, which saw Tokugawa Ieyasu become the first shogun of Japan, sort of united Japan as it were. Before that was just lots of warring states and daimyo, just like feudal lords. But the Battle of Sekigahara did away with all that. Kind of, what's the word, solidified Japan, or anyway, it got one ruler. However, Musashi fought on the wrong side. And he actually, to avoid being captured, he hid out on the battlefield for 3 days amongst the loads of dead, rotting corpses. Because if he'd been captured, he would probably just been executed. So yeah, he lay with, I can't imagine it, for 3 days among all the bodies. And then he was only 20, still only 21, and went to Kyoto, which was at that time the capital of Japan. There he was sort of determined to make his name. I guess he'd been through all this he'd faced death a few times already, and he wasn't done yet. He was only 21. So he faced a powerful warrior named Yoshioka Genzayamon, who just laughed at him, and then he took some persuading that Musashi wasn't actually joking. They had a duel, and for some reason Genzayamon, he'd lost consciousness, and that made that, I don't know how he lost consciousness, but he lost consciousness and he was judged to be the loser. His brother stepped in, Genzayamon's brother, to sort of avenge the family honour, and he challenged Musashi, but this time Musashi just killed him. And word began to spread of his formidable talent with a sword. Excuse me, I'll not wet the whistle, as you say. Yeah, so by now he's getting pretty famous in Japan. Genzayamon's relatives were still not done trying to avenge the ignoble defeats. Well, Genzayamon being somehow rendered unconscious and his younger brother being killed by Musashi. The third challenge came from the Genzayamon clan, and this was from Genzayamon's 12-year-old son. However, this was a trap. It was intended that Musashi would turn up for the appointed duel, and instead it would be an ambush. And they weren't taking any chances. There were like 80 samurai who were going to be hiding out around the supposed duel site to just suddenly appear and cut him down. They were just going to deal with him. It was unusual for Musashi. He actually got to that supposed duel, so-called duel. He got there early because he made a point of being late to a lot of these duels, which is just the ultimate insult. Still Japan's famous for its punctuality, and back then to be late was just the worst insult you could give someone. But he got there this time, very fortunately for him. I don't know. I think it was just chance he turned up early, because when he turned up, his assassins, all 80 or so of them, were still trying to hide themselves. So he got out there pretty quickly. I think a few samurai tried to stop him. They got cut down for their troubles. And he also killed the 12-year-old son of Gonzaemon. Harsh times. And then he took to his heels. He got out of there. It still didn't discourage him from making his name as a swordsman and engaging in duels. But now he took to walking around Japan, accepting duels. And, well, I've written here that history informs us he never lost. Well, he wouldn't have lost, because 99 times out of 100 using a duel was you were killed, or you got such a terrible injury like your arm cut off or something, you weren't going to be dueling again. And there was a certain hubris overtook him, and echoing sort of his first duel, he even got rid of it, or sometimes he didn't even use a proper sword, and he carved a wooden sword out of a paddle just to insult his opponent. That, turning up late, like he really didn't, he couldn't care less. And he killed opponents that way. He just beat them to death with this wooden sword. In fact, actually, a further insult was, having even beaten them unconscious, he wouldn't actually give them the fatal blow, which was another, he wouldn't actually relieve them of their shame at having been defeated. He let them live to carry this tremendous shame that they've been defeated. It's some evidence that he had like depression later on in life. He seemed to veer between being incredibly cocky and so full of talent, for just being a swordsman, and kind of liking to show off and act up to the crowd and stuff, and sort of being a repressive, a recluse. And he wound up living in a cave on his own, dying from what was most likely stomach cancer, but still he found the energy with him, final burst of energy. He wrote his famous book of 5 rings, which is about philosophy and martial arts in general. And basically he finished that, and he died just a few days afterwards. And that was Musashi, the legendary Japanese swordsman.